Welcome to Response Able Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the Response Able Parenting podcast. Let's get into it. It's 2025, and there is more parenting advice than ever before. Yet we're still confused, stuck, and defaulting back to the way our parents raised us in the 80s and 90s. Parenting has evolved since then, and it's time your strategies do too. Welcome to the Response Able Parenting community. This is where you get the support you're looking for so you can make fast, positive, and long-term change in your household. Inside my community, you get access to my signature course, Stuck to Strong, your emotional regulation roadmap to raising ADHD and strong-willed kids. You have my Fast Way to Regulate challenge, giving you 30 days of nervous system work to completely rewire how you react to the stress of parenting. On top of that, you have weekly opportunities to connect with me and get personalized support on issues that challenged you that week. You also have quarterly workshops, bite-sized mini lessons to keep you motivated, and everything I add for as long as you're a member. This is your place to filter out all the noise and get practical strategies that work. Join the community today and start feeling relief as early as tonight. Welcome back. I am pumped because I have a new background and things are looking spicy, and I am just really enjoying the full new vibe. I feel like it's fresh. I feel like it's fun and totally different. And I don't know, I'm into it. The reason I switched is, yes, it's a little bit more effort to shift everything to the living room, but I really did this because I just finished wrapping up the filming for the 30-day regulation challenge, and I loved the vibe. It was just fun to talk and engage in a different way. And so I kept the background, and I'm going to do this for as long as it feels great. The challenge is we have dogs feeling like it's their space too. So we got some gnawing on some bones and some chaos in that direction, but we are going to try to keep it as cool and chill as possible. Anyways, about that 30-day regulation challenge, I will be kicking off a live challenge starting July 1st. It's going to be a 30-day live joint regulation challenge. Lord knows I will need to go through my own challenge as well, because I will essentially be solo parenting for most of the summer. And that's tough. That's tough in general. But summer just hits differently because you're with each other all the time, like all the time. There's very little structure. I don't have a ton of camp set up. So yeah, it's going to be spicy. It's going to be a little intense. So that kicks off July 1st. It's 30 straight days. Every single day, you will get a prompt to figure out what is going on internally for you, learning your patterns, reading your patterns, learning where we need to put that pattern interrupter, which is going to be that regulation tool. We are going to access that tool in that heat of the moment before things fly off the handle, before the negative pattern is repeated. We're going to do that every single day together. And you're going to have access to me every single day in the comments. I'm going to be jumping in, answering further questions. It's going to be really, really, really special. So that kicks off July 1st, goes through July 30th. And honestly, it's just going to be a really wonderful time to keep your practices top of mind so that you're actually doing what you want to do. You're actually regulating on a regular basis. You're putting time, energy, and effort into it. Honestly, it's not a huge time commitment. Some of the lessons are about 5 minutes. Some of the video lessons can be as much as like 12 minutes. Again, that's not that much. And if you put it on 1.5 times speed, so it becomes more conversational, it makes it even faster. The work is going to be in those journal prompts, and the work is going to be in actually doing the regulation practice. But I know you're here because you want to do that work. You want to improve. You want to change the relationship with yourself and your kids. You want to create that internal sense of safety for yourself so that you're not always boiling over. You're not always at that tipping point. And that's what this challenge is going to really give you. It's going to set the foundation. It's going to teach you what your triggers are. It's going to give you education and action and really put together some systems that make a lot of sense for not just you, but your entire family. I'm telling you, it is like a masterclass in learning your body, learning your cues, learning how to regulate, and it is absolutely magical. So you can have that for free inside of my community. If you join as a community member, you got that. It's already in there along with all of my other courses, workshops, weekly Q&As, and all of that good stuff. Or you can buy it on its own as a regular program, just its standalone thing. You can get that in my bio in Instagram, and I will also include it in the show notes. So that kicks off on July 1st. I hope to see you there. It's going to be truly amazing. Speaking of regulation, I want to talk about values and boundaries today because I did this post about kind of the end of the school year chaos, and I had to go to a PTA meeting. My husband came home, like he parked, I was pulling away. We kind of were like, see you later, tap out, your turn. And I had left the kids watching one episode of that Bear Grylls show where he like takes a celebrity and they have to do this whole challenge and they have to like compete against the elements. Anyways, they're watching that. I come home from the PTA meeting about an hour later and they're still watching the show, and that's fine, but it's wrapping up. And my husband's like, okay, it's okay. We made a deal. And they said to me, I promise we will do our entire bedtime routine, which is about 45 minutes, and we'll do it in 20 minutes. They've done it before, so it wasn't really like a huge stretch, a huge ask, but they, kind of negotiated a deal. Like, we'll watch this final show. Yes to that. And yes to a speedy bedtime. Now, they didn't do a speedy bedtime, right? They started goofing off. They started messing around. Like my younger kid was like doing burners, like, like how dogs kind of do like these burners up and down the hallway. They still had a lot of energy, a lot of activation. And my husband and I were getting really annoyed. We were getting super frustrated because we're like, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. You made a promise and you're going against that promise. Like, that's messed up. And we were pulling in past experiences, bringing those into that moment. We were feeling really taken advantage of. We felt like it was like super rude. And we were getting really angry. And we both noticed how we were going to pull in some threats that we instantly wanted to punish and take away and threaten and all this stuff to get our children to comply. Now, what we did differently is I gave them a do-over. I said, listen, because you've seen in past episodes that I've talked about our value-based boundary system where we have our 5 values, which is trust, listening, cooperation, safety, and kindness. Those are in little bubbles on their bedroom wall. So neutrally, we said, listen, hey guys, you're crossing this boundary line around our value of trust, and that doesn't feel good to us. So we're going to give you a do-over. Okay, take that do-over. Let's do this again, because what you're showing us is we need to shrink that boundary, right? You're showing us we can't trust you around TV, right? We can't trust you to follow through after we've given you a little bit of extra TV. So let's do a do-over, show us you can do it, and then we can continue to enjoy the privilege of TV. Now, they didn't take the do-over. They were like, no, they just kept acting crazy. And so we were like, all right, we gave you one more opportunity. We gave you one more chance. And now we have to shrink that bubble. Now, when the execution comes of shrinking the bubble, what does that mean? It means limiting the privileges that they have, right? TV, in my opinion, that's a privilege. So it's now shrinking that privilege around TV. And so I said neutrally, hey, listen, you didn't do what we asked. We gave you a do-over. You, again, chose not to follow through with your end of the bargain. So we are going to shrink the bubble. Tomorrow, we are not going to be able to do TV. I'm so sorry, but that's what happens. When you don't follow through with your end of the bargain, that is the consequence, right? Now, I posted this because it was actually really helpful. And I just got so many people saying, you're just sugarcoating, you gave a punishment. Like it's not called a consequence. It's actually a punishment. I'm so sick of this BS of these gentle parents coming in and sugarcoating or changing the rhetoric or all this stuff. And it's like, say what you actually did. You're still punishing your kid. You took something away from them. That's a punishment. So I kind of want to go through this a little bit more and kind of suss this out because, yes, when we're talking about punishments versus consequences, it can get kind of like muddied, but I want to flush that out because it it's kind of like semantics, right? It's yes. Did the children end up with no TV the next day? Yeah. But here's the reality of what a punishment is. A punishment is retribution. A punishment is retaliation. A punishment is basically like trying to create a really negative, really nasty, really aggressive situation and almost making it so uncomfortable for the person. We want to create discomfort. We want to create pain so that they feel it. They feel the negativity around it. And that hopefully, quote unquote, is the motivator for them to never want to do it again. When the punishment, you've heard this before, if the punishment is severe enough, a child will not want to do it again. Okay, so we understand that. A punishment is a harsh retaliation focused on creating a negative environment, focused on creating a negative sensation in the body, focused on creating discomfort, focused on creating pain so that we create behavior change. Okay, we can do that. We can create an incredibly negative environment. We can create removing TV in a very painful way. We can absolutely make it a negative experience. No question. The TV at the end of the day still gets removed. Okay. Now let's talk about when we talk about values, we have a limit or a line, which is a boundary of how much privilege is around that one area, right? Trust. When we make an agreement, we have a limit and a line around how much we're willing to teach within that. Again, that's the boundary. A boundary is my tolerance level of what I am willing to tolerate with my children around a certain thing. Some people's boundaries around trust might be much bigger. My boundary of trust, you get one do-over. So it's, yes, we're working on semantics where it's nuanced in that way. Somebody might be like, you have 5 different tries because I really want you to get this. Somebody might be like, you wrong me once, you're out. That's that person's individual boundary line. But that, again, that's why it's challenging. And that's why people get all riled up because it's like, no, this isn't consequences. That's not a boundary. It's like we all have different boundary lines. It's your level of tolerance of what you're willing to accept and where you're willing to be flexible. So we in our household have a do-over. That is part of our boundary because I believe that every person gets one more try because we can get wrapped up in our chaos. We can get wrapped up in our feelings. We can get wrapped up. And sometimes, even as adults, it takes a person coming in and saying, hey, that didn't land right in my body. I don't know if that was intentional or not. It didn't feel good to me. Would you like to try it again in a way that would feel better? That's a great communication strategy as opposed to, geez, why'd you say it like that? Right? So we offered the do-over. They didn't take the do-over. So as a result, they crossed the boundary line and the boundary around trust is shrinking. Trust was associated in that experience around TV, right? I get to trust you that you will follow through with your end of the bargain. Trust, follow through. And because you did not follow through, you cross the boundary that we have around the value of trust. I want to share my free guide to managing our kids' meltdowns. We know that meltdowns are normal, but they still suck and can be ridiculously triggering. This 4-step free guide will help you break the cycle of reactivity and help you get through the meltdown without snapping yourself. Don't join your kid in the tantrum. Grab my free guide and learn how to manage meltdowns like a pro. Head to responsablepparenting.ck.page/meltdown or just go and click the link in my show notes and get your guide today. So now everybody's all up in my comments saying that's not a natural consequence. You're correct. It was an imposed consequence of the result of crossing the boundary. So I believe that consequences are helpful as teachers. Natural consequences for the win, always, right? If I say, hey, please pick up your stuff, don't leave your shoes out because it's going to rain tonight, and they leave their shoes out, then that's the natural consequence that they have wet shoes the next day. Great, wonderful teacher. Totally. And as a parent, it is also helpful to teach cause and effect, and natural consequences won't always be there. Another natural consequence. Hey guys, you guys are wrestling too hard. Somebody's going to get hurt. No, mom, we're having so much fun. We're fine. It's all fine. And then what do you know? Somebody gets hurt. That's a natural consequence. But when it comes to crossing your boundary that you have established, right? Then the imposed consequence, I believe, is necessary. And here's the difference where it gets semantic and nuanced and all the things. I can impose a consequence. I can impose a consequence when my child has crossed the boundary, and I can do it in a way that teaches. I can do it in a way that's neutral. I can do it in a way that's free from shame. I can do it in a way that honors their feelings. I can do it in a way that doesn't pile on my aggression and my dysregulation onto the moment. And that, I believe, is a better way to learn. And why? Because a punishment is going to flare up our child's defenses, because it's going to get their nervous system all sorts of riled up, because they're now in fight or flight mode. They're going to be desperately trying to, hey, no, mom, no, don't, they're going to be on guard from the situation. So I believe that punishments, because they are steeped in negativity, steeped in shame, and there could be a physical, mental, or an emotional hurt that comes from that. And so, yeah, I believe that sets our kids' nervous system off into fight or flight. That really sets us up for a negative pattern. And it's deeply dysregulating and deeply troubling for the child. And so, no, they're not really learning from that punishment. What they're learning is this feels very unsafe. They are not, in fact, learning the lesson that you are trying to teach. Let's flip that over to teaching a value-based boundary system where you have your value, you give your child an opportunity to learn what it looks like to live within that value. You teach them on a regular basis what it looks like to cross that value boundary line. Then you give them that opportunity to reel it back and try again and stay within the boundary line of that value. And if they choose to continue and repeatedly go outside the boundary, maybe they need a little bit more clarity about what the boundary is, about what the value is, and what it looks like to live with outside of that value, to operate outside of that value. If clarity is given and they're still crossing that line, then yes, I believe the privilege of that situation is then removed. We're shrinking the boundary. If safety, let's use safety. If safety is a value, which it is in our household, and your child wants to go biking without their helmet, and you say, safety is a value that we have, you're crossing the boundary of that value when you choose to not wear a helmet. If they say, I'm still not going to wear my helmet, I would then say, as opposed to waiting for the natural consequence of the concussion, which would inevitably happen, I am going to impose the consequence, shrink the boundary, and just simply say, you are unable to use your bike until you are operating inside the boundary lines of our value of safety. Simply put. So yes, is it an imposed consequence? Yes. But is it being used to teach? Yes. Am I saying it in a neutral way that is not filled with shame? Yes. Am I helping my child's nervous system co-regulate by honoring their feelings? Yes. So this is the difference. And unfortunately, as you can see, this is a longer podcast with a longer explanation. So in the 10 slides that I shared, it didn't necessarily, I couldn't pack it all in, right? But I think it is important to see where you get kind of flustered when you're like, ooh, maybe it's maybe it's a me thing where I'm not necessarily understanding the difference between punishments and consequences, and maybe I'm using punishments because I'm feeling dysregulated. Maybe I'm using punishments because I'm super frustrated and I don't know how to break that pattern. And this value-based boundary system, that kind of sounds pretty awesome. Maybe I should be looking into that. Maybe I need to get some support there. And I am happy to share with you that inside of my community, in the Stuck to Strong program, in my workshop library, as well as in my regulation challenge, I break down how to do that as well. So there's tons of support, as well as just talking to me about it inside my community and asking, hey, how do I set this up? This is what I work on with my clients. If they're like, I don't actually understand how to set this up, this is what I do on a regular basis. Okay, so I hope that was really helpful to understand what the difference is between boundaries and consequences, natural consequences and imposed consequences, how to hold a boundary, and how to really explain to a child what it looks like to be inside a boundary line, which is, to me, much easier when there is a value associated with that, because our children understand what it feels like to be kind and what it feels like to be not kind. They understand what it feels like to lie. They understand what it feels like to be honest, right? So if we have our boundaries wrapped in a value, we get to teach what it looks like to stay within that value, right? And what it looks like to cross that boundary line. So I hope that was really helpful. I cannot wait to see you all inside of the Fast Way to Regulate 30-day challenge that's kicking off July 1st. This is going to be a huge way to really solidify your regulation during the summer. I mean, honestly, we're going to hit it hard. It's going to be so fantastic. So I cannot wait to see you there. Thank you again for joining me, and I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Responsible Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.